You know his face, the braids, the blue eyes, the calm before the killing. You've watched him claw his way from a farmer to a king, but that face belongs to an actor. Go looking for the man behind it, in the records written while the Vikings were still raiding, and something strange happens. He isn't there. No English chronicle names him, no Frankish annal names him. The most famous Viking who ever lived left no footprint in his own century. And yet his sons did. They are written down, by name, by the monks who watched them come ashore, real men, with a very real army. So here is the question this video is actually about. Not what did Ragnar do, but did Ragnar ever exist at all? Or did his sons need to invent him? Start with the legend, because the legend is magnificent. The sagas say his name was Ragnar, and his byname was Loðbrók, shaggy breeches. He earned it, they say, killing a giant serpent that coiled around the hall of a girl named Thora. To survive its venom, he had breeches of hide, boiled in pitch, and rolled in sand. He walked through the poison, drove a spear through the beast, and won her. Later, he marries again, and this is where the storytellers show their hand. His second wife, Aslaug, is secretly the daughter of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer and the Valkyrie Brynhild. In other words, the saga plugs Ragnar straight into the single most prestigious bloodline in all of Norse legend. That is not how you remember a man, that is how you build one. He becomes a king in Denmark and Sweden. He raids everywhere, and every version agrees his sons were extraordinary. Because the sons are the part that has to be true. Then comes the death, the scene everyone remembers. The sagas say Ragnar grew reckless. He sailed for England with too few ships, was wrecked on the coast, and fell into the hands of King Aelle of Northumbria. Aelle threw him into a pit of snakes, and as the vipers wound around him, Ragnar sang. The death song survives, the chronicle, and its last lines are not about his own pain, they are a message aimed over his shoulder at his sons. The piglets would grunt now if they knew the plight of the old boar, meaning, my children will come, and they will not forgive. It is a perfect ending, which is exactly the problem, because a real king named Aelle of Northumbria did exist, and the men who came to avenge a father did exist. Only the father in the middle is made of smoke. And what later stories say his sons did to Aelle in return would become a legend almost as dark as Ragnar's own death. Here is what breaks the story open. Everything you just heard was written down between 200 and 400 years after it supposedly happened. Ragnar's saga is 13th century Icelandic. Saxo the Dane wrote his version around the year 1200. The events belong to the 800s. That is the same distance as somebody today writing the definitive detailed biography of a knight from the 1600s. With no documents, only stories passed mouth to mouth. And the versions do not agree. Saxo gives Ragnar different wives, different wars, a different death. The Icelanders give another. They can't even keep his sons consistent. Now go to the people who were actually alive in the 800s, the English monks, the Frankish clerks, writing year by year as it happened. They record Viking fleets in obsessive detail. They record the leaders' names, and not one of them, in the whole 9th century, writes down a war king named Ragnar Lothbrok. So who is underneath? There are real men whose shadows the legend seems to be stitched from. In the year 845, a Viking fleet rowed up the Seine and sacked Paris. The Frankish annals name its leader, Reginherus, a name that in Norse is Ragnar. He took a fortune in silver to leave. Then, the annals say, a plague tore through his fleet on the way home and many died. Not a snake pit, but a Ragnar, real, on paper, in the right century. And then there are the sons, and here the ground turns solid. The Anglo-Saxon chronicle records that in 865, a great heathen army landed in England. Later English writers call its commanders the sons of Lothbrok, Ivar, Halfdan, Ubba. Ivar the Boneless is one of the best attested Vikings of the entire age. Bjorn Ironside raids the Mediterranean in Frankish sources. Sigurd's Snake in the Eye founds a dynasty. The sons are carved in contemporary stone. The father is written in later ink. Which points to an uncomfortable answer. If you are Ivar or Halfdan or their descendants sitting on land you took by the sword, you need one thing more than any battle can give you. A reason. A father worth avenging, a bloodline worth obeying. "We are the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, and we came to avenge him" is not just a war cry, it is a claim to a throne. It turns plunder into justice and warlords into a dynasty. A father like that is so useful that if he did not exist, he would have to be assembled. A raid here, a death song there, a serpent slayer's daughter married in to borrow her fame. There is even a clue in the name. Some scholars have argued that Loðbrók, shaggy breeches, may not have started as a man's nickname at all, but as a name attached to a woman or a banner, later handed to the father the legend needed. The most famous Viking of all may be less a man than a flag his sons flew. And maybe that is the truer story anyway. Ragnar Lothbrok did something no real king in his century managed. He did not die. 1,200 years later, he is on screens in 100 countries, more alive than any Viking who actually drew breath. The legend won. The Vikings understood something we pretend we've outgrown, that a people is held together less by what happened than by the story they agree to tell about it. Give them a father, and scattered raiders become a nation. His sons were real, and in 865 they brought an army to England unlike anything the island had seen before. What happened next deserves its own story. That's the next one. Until then, remember that the most dangerous thing the Vikings ever built was not a ship or a blade. It was a name, and the willingness to die for it.